So essentially, we are here because of the failure of the Church of Scientology or its numerous aliases. So I'm not going to talk about what has happened to them because that's probably pretty much known, and it's just a long story, which essentially where the church has gone wrong. Essentially, it's in its whole philosophy, I think, toward the subject of auditing and how the technology should be applied. When it was applied, I think, in a benevolent fashion in the 1960s, like at St. Phil when Elwich was there, things were going rather easily. People would simply apply the technology and everyone seemed to be happy, and there was no need to scream and shout at each other's throat. And there was nobody breathing down one's neck because of some statistic. And as time went, some people, I think, got into the idea of power. And then the application of the technology has become essentially the tool to be used to control by some people. If I look the recent development by RTC, like the covenant golden age of tech knowledge and all those things, and I've talked to many people who have done the recent training the last 10-15 years with the church. Essentially, the philosophy is everything is on the structure, the precise application of details about how to audit without understanding any of it. While the earlier approach was to understand the basics and then add the technique to it. Because the important thing with auditing or any subject, it's the basic thing that underlies it. So I was explaining the basic philosophy difference between what we're doing and what the church is doing. It seems that church has become completely focused on the technique and the so-called perfect application. And it's actually the most imperfect application because it's like trying to build the most fantastic building on quicksand. I mean, that's about how silly it is. It's simply not going to work because they somehow think that an auditor is like a musician without a soul, that they're going to do the most perfect job. Well, maybe you can, like a robot, rattle everything in sequence, but then, the musician would not communicate if he does that, and an auditor would have the person not in session. Because I've repaired many people that have been audited in the church in the last 10 years. There must be about 20 people now. And there's one way of describing the TRs and the presence of auditors that where they're apparently being taught at Flag, which ought to be the top place on the planet. There's one expression I never heard before. I've heard lousy TRs, robotic TRs, out of session, uncomfortable, stuffed, talking to the floor. But I never heard inhuman as a description to an auditor. So the auditor sounds inhuman. The perfect psychiatric concept of the 21st century. I remember reading, there was a story, I think it was Arthur C. Clarke, it was, I think, called 2045, a visit at the psychiatrist. And it starts that way: "You look fine today." Nothing but an evaluation, to start. And it just goes on ramble, and then it turns out that perfect psychiatrist of the 21st century is a robot, a computer. And of course it does rattle every cure perfectly, and of course has an understanding of zero. And of course duplication the same. So basically, they teach auditors to do so-called perfect techniques, but not have the basic. The basic is simply, it's so simple. It's to be there and communicate, and to be able to control the session, and to direct it, and to be spontaneous. The best auditor would be a spontaneous auditor, and actually, you could almost say if the guy really knew what he was doing, he would be completely unprepared. That doesn't mean the auditor should not study the PC, but if you're completely unprepared, you will be spontaneous, and if you really know what you're doing, you would be able to get anything done, anything sorted out with the PC. So spontaneity comes from being natural TRs, and natural comes cycle. And in the 1950s, this is what was being pushed on people. This is what they learned. This is why at FLAG, I've observed many people doing internships. And one thing I would always find interesting is the people who would complete the fastest FLAG internship. And FLAG internship have been known as being the top of the top, where you really learn in the best way, supervised by the best people, the best way that trade of auditing. The people who complete the internship fastest will be relatively untrained people that were old-timers. They would finish fastest of anyone, followed by well-experienced and seasoned auditors. And the reason is because the TRs and presence were completely natural. And once they had that, no matter what happened in session, they could always fix it. Because if you're there, it's like if you're there with a friend, anything that happens, you know, you can handle. If it's your best friend, then that's the way it should be in an auditing session. So nothing can go wrong. But instead, someone who does not understand auditing, because the person in charge of the church, contrary to his predecessor, which was LRH, does not understand what auditing is about, because LRH was always known as the best auditor around. From the 1950s, it was known he could achieve results where many others couldn't. Why? Because his presence, his TRs were so much in. And of course he knew the techniques. And of course he was the most trained in the technology, because he had supervised all these courses and seen all auditors supervising, and then of course developed the technology. So he was the most competent auditors in CS and administrator, because he's been running that organization for ages. So therefore he was the most successful. And now you have a person replacing him who has never audited people except a few hours on a course. And he's got his own little ideas about auditing. I was talking to one of his roommates, actually, apparently. I happened to audit someone who actually was a roommate of the current leader of the church for a little while. And he told me this guy had very strange ideas about auditing and PCs. He felt there was something wrong with PCs, you know, because their FNs are not right. So there's something wrong with them, you know. You should. And it's the same attitude I found on the worst auditors, is they always feel there's something basically wrong with the PCs. So it's not wrong in the way of they have Ks, let's fix it because everyone's got Ks, but it's like there's something fundamentally wrong with that person, let's change his attitude because he doesn't fit the mold of what a PC ought to look like. A PC look what he looks like. So some people in session behave one way, some behave another way, everyone behaves a little bit different. That's the way they are. But this guy feels they should all behave the same. And then the whole focus has been on the techniques. And I'll give you aberrant examples that have been made to go through. And I would only do them in front of the video because there was no way to pass a video without doing those. Here's an example. When you start a session, one of the early things to do is a can squeeze. Now, it happened that some auditors never bothered to teach a PC how to do a can squeeze. To do can squeeze is quite simple, but some PCs, they didn't know how to squeeze a can, and the auditor never bothered to teach them and accept the PC squeezing the cans in a completely correct way. So as a result, a meter drill was revised, e-meter drill 5, became e-meter drill 5RA, which goes through a whole procedure to teach auditors to teach PCs to give proper can squeeze. So that's all fine to improve that drill, there's nothing wrong there. However, they decided to incorporate that drill within a session. So whereas LH has always said, squeeze the cans, please, this became forbidden. You had to say, I want you to gradually increase the grip on the cans until light squeeze is achieved and then relax it. And if you said, I want to slowly increase the grip on the cans, or you said until you get a light squeeze, that was a flunk because you used the wrong word or the wrong sequence. Same thing. Basal metabolism. Some, you have to take a deep breath and let it go through the mouth, or some people didn't do that, they let it through the nose or something like that. Again, they simply have to teach a PC how to do it. And unless a person is a mental retard, once you've taught him how to do it and gone over it a few times, just tell a PC, take a deep breath, let it out, or deep breath, or whatever they have agreed upon, ought to do it. But no. I want you to take a deep breath, hold it for just a moment, and let it out through the mouth. And again, if you said any other word, including I want you to take a deep breath and let it out, no, you didn't say hold it for a moment, or anything like that, that was a flunk. And it's the same thing, the checklist. In 77, the checklist was made for the session. And actually I forgot the sequence, but I think it is check for if the PC has had enough food, check that he's had enough sleep. Well, if you check sleep and food, that was a flunk, because it says food and sleep. I mean, that shows like the stupidity, Especially if the PC told you, if the PC, let's say, has told you, let's say you're on the way to session, and he says, oh, I really ate very well tonight, I had a great meal, and I'm really not hungry at all. You have to say, are you hungry? I just told you. And this is how we were taught. This is the way you have to run a session. And this is incidentally completely opposite to the one session that we were made to watch over and over. There's one session, and only one, of LRH auditing a PC, and it's metered, and you see LRH metering. There's only one such session in existence, and it will never be shown because the person has been declared suppressive at the PC, and therefore it will never be shown. We were exceptionally shown that video, and I've watched it maybe 100 times. It's a very short session. It only lasts a few minutes, but it has every element of a session there. It has the TRs, the presence, the ARC, everything there, and it's done per the model session used in 61. And what it is very simple, Is the room all right? He says, and the PC glances at the camera and it says, I guess so. And the PC, by the way, is Resh Sharp, his earlier friend. He was one of his closest friends. Resh Sharp was clear number 7. And he was one of the greatest friends of LH at St. Hill, one of the few people that were in his personal circle. And he got declared unjustly because of some mission that came, and treated him like a Gestapo. And he didn't take this and told them, screw you, and then they declared him instantly. And my ex-wife, who worked for the SO1 unit, told me Elrich had written to him many times, originating letters and registrar of reference to the survey was complete, and now he has since passed away. At any rate, so after there's a room all right, then you get, squeeze a can squeeze. This is the exact command Elrich used. And, again, what it says in a session, it says you get a can squeeze. He doesn't say, please squeeze a can, or I want you to squeeze. I mean, anything you say should be fine. I mean, provided. See, what counts for a session is that you keep the same protocol. Otherwise, it goes through the session, the PC out of session. If you use a different expression every session, that might throw the PC off. So you should stick basically to the same pattern. But whether you say, squeeze the cans, please, or please squeeze the cans, I mean, you've got to be some type of mental retard to think that that's going to change the result of the session. So anyway, so squeeze the cans. Now there was no, the metabolism was actually not done. That's right, there was no metabolism done. Then he started a session, and it's again the pattern was start of session, because today this is a session. Then he says, what goals would you like to set for the session? What gains would you like to have? Then they simply go and run the happiness process, which is, touch that. And he run that for a few minutes. And again, it's perfect aircy. He's there. They're great calm. You can really see the control, the presence. You really see, this is someone with superlative TRs. And after a few commands, he asked, squeeze the cans, please, because for the technical date on the subject, if the read increase on the can squeeze, there's been an increase in happiness. And there where you had, 1/3 of a down drop on the can squeeze, the needle goes off the pin. So, and then Elrich says, well, we had a tremendous increase in happiness here. Now, this was permissible in 61, and then later, Elrich realized that making comments like that is actually evaluative and could put a bit of attention on the meter because you told him what the meter did, and some cases could start to figure. So therefore, this is no longer done that way. But nevertheless, he tells a PCDR factor, which is a bit like you indicate a floating needle today. Then after that, he asks if the PC made his gains, and he made his goals. And then, and that time I find it's hilarious, that the auditor says, well, thank you for making those gains. He thanks the PC for making the gains, thanks the PC for achieving the goals. And then he ensures the PC is ready to end session, then he ends session. And then he says something, a command which, I've read a lot of things in the free zone, and this command ought to be done by a lot of people in the free zone that don't do it. And he tells the PC, tell me I am no longer auditing you. You are no longer auditing me. Because I see so many discussion groups on the internet, I can tell you, their session has never ended. They're still talking about it. And that's basically how that session went. And what you see, it's the perfect session. And it's really, really simple. And what holds it all together, TRs, communication cycle, presence, and RC. And those things you learn early, basically in training. And then the rest is all techniques, because if the auditor make some mistakes, it's all secondary, can always be fixed. And the focus in the church has been in all these little details, and then they end up having failed cases after failed cases, you know. Now it's really alarming as far as the church is concerned, because they now have PCs who have recently done the LSAT flag coming to see me to get them repaired. I mean, this is scary. That means their own class 12s cannot audit the else properly. And me, who doesn't even have the folders, is able to repair them, which I think is incredible, because first of all, it's never been done before, because the L's are quite complex procedures, and to be able to fix them without having the folders at hand, and of course the PC is not trained on the L, so he can help you relatively little. I think it's amazing, but what is a bit more amazing is that these guys are being flogged on to begin with. So if the class 12 do that, you can imagine what the lower level auditors are doing. And it's all put an accent on the technique, and then they have this strange idea, you know, this mythical version of LH, because what has been changed in the technology, it's not, the books are mildly changed, but there is not really that much change in the books. It's mostly the lectures have been edited to sanitize them and make them politically correct. So any positive mention about any helpers have been removed. So now they have this mythical view that LH was not held by anybody, that it was a bolt from the blue, that he suddenly teleported himself from some universe into Earth and now gets it all done, just like Jesus Christ on the cross, a miracle. And it's a false representation. I mean, if Scientology is supposed to study of truth and knowledge, incidentally, I read the very first definition LH gave of Scientology. I made some extensive research and looked at the first place the word Scientology was ever used by LH. And it is in a lecture from 1952, from June 1952, called Dialectics, the Modern Miracle. And he comes with a new coined word that he described as Scientology. And he says it is the study of truth, not just knowledge, study of truth. And he says, it also interestingly, it is the parent science out of which dialectics came. In other words, Scientology was conceived of by LH first, and dialectics second. Because most people in the free zone understand it the other way, and most people in the church also. Of course, dialectics came in 1950, and the word Scientology was coined in 52, so you can say, of course, dialectics came first. But as far as the first concept of Scientology came in 1938 to LH. And it came through that the book Excalibur, and for some reason Robertson took Excalibur to describe one of his levels, perhaps based on the sword Excalibur. But the Excalibur essentially means like the bolt from the blue. And I have actually know someone who read the original book Excalibur, and also there is a rather obscure website of the church where, believe it or not, they have the first chapter Excalibur. And it's somewhat obscure because I did a lot of research, and of course all people in the free zone, they won't come close to the church websites. And there is the first chapter there. And essentially the story of Excalibur, the reason why it ties into Scientology is because it's essentially the story of a king who asked all of his wise men to put all knowledge together and to put it in a hierarchy and to organize it. And he wants all knowledge in the universe to put in 100 books. So they finally do that, and then the book goes on to describe how they put all that knowledge together and how all knowledge is put in hierarchy. So therefore you can see where Scientology fits in there, because it is the study of knowledge, and of course knowledge has to be organized. It's a bit like a tree, where it starts with one subject and it branches, and each subject branches into sub-subject and so forth. And then finally, he tells those people, after they've published 100 books, which is very pleased with, to summarize all of it into a single book. So then they work and then they present him for the book. Then he has to summarize the whole book in a single sentence. And they somehow work it out, and they've got a single sentence. And then finally, put everything in a single word. And the word was survive. And that's where one can see it. In my view, I would say B might be actually better, because survive is actually a manifestation of to be. And of course, a fundamental purpose per the factor is the decision to be. And it is permanent. And of course, survive, it's the method that someone used to in order to come into be. And it can of course become aberrated, inverted, and all sort of things. But that's essentially the origin of Scientology, and it came to Elridge, per what he says in 1938 when he thought about it. And when he gave that book originally for publication, they felt it was too cerebral, not interesting enough to be published, so therefore it was not accepted as a book. So that's a basic story of Excalibur. A PC that I knew, she still kicked herself in the ass for not having bought the manuscript when it was offered to her in 1968. It was apparently for sale around that time. Someone had a couple copies, and she was sure it was a good amount of money back then, but nevertheless, because I'm not aware anyone has a copy. Anyway, so to go back to the original subject, with Scientology, it's the fundamental thing with it is to understand it and also the basics. Because I've been in a free zone for some time, or actually done auditing, because the word free zone has some strange connotations sometimes. And you see a number of people who don't seem to grasp the basic purpose. Like some people do some really strange things or even out-ethics things. And then you start to wonder, what the hell what are they doing? Why should they do those things? Because obviously, the idea would be in the free zone should actually, and this is possibly why the church has done nothing, because the free zone has had a repute of being unprofessional, anything goes, the weirder you are, the more some people get acclaimed. And if it was professional, properly trained, with sanity instead of just being punished, then you would have the best trained people. And then of course, people would all leave the church, because people simply go where the tech is best. You don't have to, do any maneuvering to get people away from a bad area to a good area. They leave on their own. And this is one of my main purposes, I think, has been, is to try to put some, professional standards and some ethical standards. And there's been a number of people opposed, but to tell the truth, there's been very few people opposed. They tend to be very loud, but there's very few people, because I've talked to hundreds of people. Like if I make the list of everyone that has ever written to me since I started to audit outside the church, there must be close to 500 different people that have written to me. And the vast majority were extremely positive. You know, some of them, you know, were not interested in continuing, or they were afraid, or they had no money, or whatever else. But they all wanted to get the tech, and they were missing the tech because they either had been kicked out of the church or felt they could not trust it anymore. And it is in a way somewhat sad to see all these people who have nowhere to go. So that is overall my views on the free zone. I said, you know, I would answer some questions. If some people have some questions on anything, I'd be more than glad to answer.
Well, I got something. You know, free zone basically is anybody's out of the church.
That's basically the definition that most people understand it.
You know. So, you know, we have this ideal of standard tech being standardly applied.
Right.
And that would cover no matter whether it's in the church or out of the church. So we have to get some kind of a gradient scale of existing conditions to an ideal condition, which would be the best tech applied the best way. What do you see in terms of implementing this admin scale on a broad scale?
Right, absolutely. Because essentially, as far as the so-called standard tech goes, there's basically an irreducible minimum, because one can, of course, understand that you cannot expect an auditor who's just been learning to audit like a veteran auditor of 10 years. But there's essentially an irreducible minimum that people should apply. For example, the irreducible minimum is to read the bulletin before you audit them. Because believe it or not, I've seen plenty of examples in the free zone. You know, same thing. If you train, at least demonstrate, drill with someone, if it's a procedure that is not an obvious one, like a repetitive command from the grades, you have to find someone who knows about it and drill it with. That's quite an irreducible minimum. And again, you know, to not go knowingly by misunderstood, to study properly, because I have seen, there was a guy, which I won't mention, you know, read, you know, it's like the buck of beer in the hand, the cigarette in the other, and he reads like that. And he calls himself a high-class auditor, of course. He said he did a classic course that way. Of course, he skipped all the materials. He never listened to the tape. He only read the transcripts. And of course, he audits like a bum. Well, it's quite obvious. So I would say that's inacceptable standard. I mean, I'm not saying you need to have necessarily a course room if you live in a small city and there's no one there. It's understandable that you can study on your own, but at least, you know, sit down and focus on the materials, read it seriously, you know, use a demo kit or use the basic barriers of studying, you know, pick up a dictionary if you don't understand a word. I say that's the irreducible minimum. You know, as far as reading definitely standards, well, because see, it's like someone who studies in some academy somewhere, so at least you have to get that level. Then after that, exactly, you basically increase the gradient. So the gradient, I would say it's basically the people, well, see, some people, they may not want necessarily to audit professionally, so they just study that way, just like the person who did academy levels doesn't do an internship. I mean, that's, I'm sure, permissible. If the one wants to audit for example, if the person wants to audit for pay, obviously if you audit for pay, you've got to have some minimum standards, just like, could you imagine anyone who has a business? I mean, if you don't know how to cook and you run a restaurant, I mean, people won't come back for burnt toast or half-raw hamburgers. I mean, that's a fact, and that's what some people who are bad auditors in a free zone do. And the end result is that they build a bad repute for them and, of course, others, because people can just think, well, if that auditor does that way and he's got this so-called repute, then the other one is probably not any better. So, but as far as like if the person is really serious about trading, you know, class 4, class 6, and so forth, then it's quite simple. He should simply, I think what the best thing is what I had proposed originally, which has not been quite implemented, because that organization had some maybe focus elsewhere, is I would be willing myself, for example, to certify people up to a certain level, essentially. One examine, like one check what they're trained on. See, essentially to certify people, it's as done through examination. That's simply the way it's done, like in the regular world. You get certified through examination, like in the information technology is a good example. The person gets an exam, he passes that exam, they don't really care what he studied. Like for example, you want to be an expert in Microsoft product. They don't really care what courses you've done, but of course if you've not done the course, you might simply not have studied properly and won't probably not pass the exam. But if you have somehow studied and understand the stuff, you go for that exam, you pass it, then you got the certificate. And they don't care what you've studied or not. You've got the certificate, then you've got the certificate. And then those who look at it, that are serious people, like in the industry, then it's okay, this guy's got the certificate, we're hiring because he's got the competence. Well, my idea would be to do something similar. I mean, it is done all over the world, and it works, because in the industry, you know, people, they are after money in the corporate world, and they will simply not continue practices that don't give money, which means having properly trained people, because these people, they have proven to be effective if they're properly certified, because if it was not an effective process, they would have dropped it. So it is an effective process, and as it's said in the information technology world, they say, why reinvent the wheel? You know, if a process has already been developed, then may as well use it. So that's basically my idea, is to have some sort of examination standards, and then to certify people, you know, they pass that standard, then the guy is certified to be class 4, and so forth.
So what about training past class 8?
Past?
Class 8? Or
8, class 8.
Yes.
Class 8.
Well, if someone has done his training to class 8 and it's valid and I verified that's valid, then and the person can audit well and the person is ethical, then I'll be more than glad to train a person on the subsequent levels. I have already done so with some people, and I intend to do so. I have declined to do it on those that either do not meet the technical standards or the ethical standards, because I have met people, and then some people have gotten even mad at me for declining that, but I will not be blackmailed by anybody. These materials, the health materials, can definitely deteriorate seriously a case if applied wrongly. They actually can be used to enslave others. So I'm not about to release them to anyone, because I remember some time ago there was someone, which I won't mention, he just writes me, first of all, the way he writes me, says, before you're gone, who says I'm going? And the implication is I'm about to drop the body. And let me tell you, watch my words, I'll bury him. I'll watch him pass away of his natural death. And probably send flowers for his funerals. So, at any rate, You write, so that's first of all insulting. You don't write to someone before you're gone. I mean, I was with two elderly people in Brazil who have a lot of translations, and I was trying to ask them to give them to me. I certainly did not say, hey, before you kick the bucket, why don't you give them to me? I mean, and they're 85, you know. I mean, I might have been more justified to say to them. But no, I certainly didn't say that anyway. And the guy said, you know, give me the materials so that it's for the common cause. Well, I told the guy, what do you mean common cause? My cause is to get the tech applied properly and ensure that those materials don't fall in wrong hands. And you asked me, out of the blue, without having met any standards, and without having proven that you can even audit, to have them. And what about talk about any compensation? Because I'm supposed not to give those materials that cost me a tremendous amount of money for no compensation. At any rate, so I said to the guy, we have no common cause. And he took it very badly, but that was a proof because the guy became so mad at me that this was a proof in itself that he was not ready. Because a person not ready, if I told him he's not ready, maybe he would try, you know, to apply the common cycle, and he'll say, well, why don't you think I'm ready? You know, I mean, that would be the obvious thing to do. If I say, you know, I don't think you're ready, I mean, minimum, I think a sane person would say, why? You know, an insane person would just send a message all over the internet to everyone and his brother. So, at any rate, so I would say, I look forward to training many class 12s in the free zone, because this is another thing that would put the church to shame, is because they, I mean, in 71 is when the class 12 course was first taught. So that means that it's been 37 years. In 37 years it made, I think, 62 class 12s. And the last class 12 they made, I think, was 12 years ago. So they typically make class 12 by batches, and they made very few of them. So I intend to produce more class 12 than they have. So I look forward to train maybe 12 or more class 12s in my lifetime. So definitely I welcome people. But again, I will not be reasonable with standards, meaning people have to be ready both technically and ethically.
Can I just share a win I had recently? While you were talking, I became aware of my phone. I thought, if it rings, I mean, this is what I'm going to do. And the instant after, it went off. I didn't
Well, I would say that's an example of a posture, and people in this society are taught to discount that ability. For the axioms, B can decide and posit anything. And in this society, people are taught they're being messed. And of course, messed can only create an effect if being impinged on it already. And of course, mess is not self-determined. And of course, someone can differently create such effects, you know. But there's a tendency to invalidate it. But yeah, I would say that's very likely that this was your posit. And that's the thing with posit is, so once I read an article in a free zone person had been misunderstood on posit, because the person was saying, why posit don't seem to work? And the person gave us one reason, lack of horsepower. And I said that's completely wrong, because a posit has absolutely no energy or force associated with it. In fact, any force needs to have a counter force in this universe. That's part of the laws of physics. Therefore, if you make a posit with any force, you will have a counter posit of equal force. That's why if you make a posit, you decide it happens, and then you forget about it. Like, I'll give an example. A year ago I said, oh, it would be nice if I go to South Africa. But I don't intend to spend a lot of money to go there because I know nobody to audit, and it's quite far from Canada. And it would be really nice to go there, nevertheless. And I forgot about it. And then suddenly someone write me out of the blue and say, can you come to audit me? I pay your trip and your accommodations if you do. So I said, fine, I'm going there in next week. So that's an example of a postulate. And it was made with no effort. I didn't think twice about it because, for me, South Africa was not like a must-have. It was something, amongst many other plans, and now it's going to happen. So, any other questions?
If you're going to build this order, right, what is the best way and the quickest way to actually get it moving?
Well, an organization, I would say, the way to get it moving is really simple. You need to have a bunch of people who decide to get it going, and they do their best. They read policies. Someone who knows more than they do, show them how to apply those policies, and obviously the more intelligent or clever the person, the more effective they can be. That's obvious, but essentially goodwill is what really builds an organization. I've seen it in both Montreal and Quebec, where they started at the very beginning. There was only 3 staff in either place when I started. And within a few months, they had over 24 staff and plenty of public. And it was simply everyone doing his job, doing his function, working at it, and everyone helping each other. Because, there was no one coming and saying, your stats are down, you better do this. Nobody was coming around, people were of course keeping track of their statistic of some kind, but they were simply doing what they should be doing, and they look at the admin scale. At the top you've got goals and purposes, and you look, the goal is to have an organization, the purpose is to get people trained and processed here, and then you do all sorts of things to make it happen, but you always keep this in mind. And generally when it's done and you've got some good people, and of course the more they have knowledgeable people, the better they will go, because obviously if someone is knowledgeable and capable and has got experience, then obviously it will be more effective. But I would say goodwill is the key ingredient, in my opinion.
Yeah. Goodwill.
Yeah, absolutely.
Make other people happy towards you and take
absolutely. Because I remember in Quebec City, it was really growing extremely fast. And goodwill was what was holding everything together. Because I know, the subject of ethics, for example, has become a complete aberration and actually a scourge in most Scientology organizations. And there, I had people, they wanted ethics. Actually, at the end of the week, someone would walk to me and say, please assign me a condition, I'm doing the wrong thing, so tell me what condition I need to be assigned. And I would just discuss it with them, and if it's danger, it's danger, or non-existence, and they would be happy and then get on with it, and of course if it's the right condition, they're happy. If it's a wrong condition, and I've seen it. And this is actually the way it runs in the church now, you see. For example, someone is having trouble with his post, his statistics. So the way it was done, that I was doing it then, I look at it and, that looks like an emergency. Or if it's really bad, danger. But today, here's the way it works in the CR. Someone comes and says, so the guy says, okay, I'm in emergency or danger. You certainly are not. Look at the stats are down, everything is collapsing, you're obviously non-existence. So, non-existence. Then the senior executive pass, you mean you cannot even assign yourself the proper condition and the place is falling apart and all these outpoints, you're obviously in liability, boy. Then his boss comes. What? You cannot even know what country you are, and you dare say that you're not in lower condition with the organization and state of emergency, you must be in doubt. And then the top brass comes, you are in treason.
And of course, every condition that's assigned wrong, you
That's
take the
right.
one under the one that you
Exactly.
actually-
Yeah, but probably at that point the person is in confusion anyway. So
And then the big boss of them all, and then the big boss of them all passes and says, "Oh, you're beyond condition, you're expelled."
RPF.
And of course, you have no statistics, no production. Which is actually what the suppressive wants. The suppressive wants the total status quo. Nothing. And of course, the safest environment for an SP is total silence and inactivity. Because that's the least threatening of an environment. And that's what the suppressive wants.
Really?